As evening settled over Okinawa, American soldiers stood at the base of the 400-foot cliff, staring up at the brutal wall of Hacksaw Ridge. The air was heavy. Everyone knew hundreds had already died trying to take this place. The cliff was more than terrain. It was a gateway into hell. Hidden caves, gun pits, and an invisible network of Japanese defenses waited above. Scouts warned the men that they faced some of Japan's most elite troops. Company B, 77 prepared to attack. Ammunition checked, grenades secured. Silent hand signals passed down the line. No one knew who would come back alive. Every man understood the battle ahead would be the deadliest since landing on Okinawa. In the middle of that rising dread, one unarmed medic, Desmond Doss, stood quietly, his eyes fixed on the cliff. He knew the fate of many men might soon rest on him. Desmond Doss grew up in Virginia, a gentle boy shaped by deep religious conviction. From childhood, he believed saving lives mattered more than taking them. When the war broke out, he volunteered on one condition. He would serve only as a medic. He swore he would never touch a weapon, a decision that made nearly everyone believe he was out of his mind. Training camp became a nightmare. Fellow soldiers mocked him, officers yelled at him, and some even assaulted him for refusing to carry a rifle. But Doss refused to quit. He requested to serve as a combat medic and set out to prove that courage didn't require a gun. Among the men of Company B, Doss surprised everyone by working relentlessly, treating injuries, hauling water, and volunteering for every medical duty. When the unit learned they would be part of the invasion of Okinawa, the most brutal battleground in the Pacific, every man knew this mission could be their last. The transport ship pushed through cold winds and rough waves. As the coastline came into view, soldiers saw smoke, wreckage, and rising fire. They understood the land ahead would test their souls. Doss sat alone at the bow of the ship, holding his Bible, knowing his purpose was clear: save as many lives as he could. When they landed on the island, the men saw a wasteland, burned-out tanks, collapsed trenches, and black smoke covering the sky. Japanese artillery thundered without pause. Dirt and metal fragments rained on the beach. Many soldiers were hit before they even took their first step inland. Doss sprinted non-stop, treating the wounded, dragging men out of explosions, working even as bullets sliced the air just inches above him. That first night on Okinawa, Doss barely slept. His hands trembled, but his resolve did not. He would stay with the men to the very end. Finally, the day came to assault the ridge. Soldiers gathered beneath the towering cliff, where a cargo net ladder stretched 400 feet upward. The commander emphasized the mission: take the ridge at any cost. Many men exchanged glances because any cost almost certainly meant mass casualties. Groups climbed the net one by one. Japanese gunfire rained down from above. Rocks and debris fell. Several soldiers were shot and tumbled off the cliffside. When they reached the top, they discovered the enemy hadn't built trenches, they had created a maze of death. And the real battle was only beginning. When Company B reached the plateau, they found a deceptive silence. No trenches, no visible positions, only scattered rocks and dead trees hiding a network of tunnels. Then the ridge erupted. Japanese machine guns opened from every direction, mowing down the first wave. Mortar shells blasted the open ground, forcing men to flatten themselves into the dirt. Doss moved non-stop across the kill zone, dragging wounded men behind cover, applying pressure bandages, and shielding the dying with his own body as bullets shredded the ground around him. By late afternoon, the attack collapsed. The survivors retreated down the cliffside, leaving dozens of wounded stranded on the ridge. Doss stayed behind, not by accident, but by choice. When darkness fell, the battlefield became a maze of shadows and whispers. Japanese soldiers roamed the plateau, finishing off wounded Americans. Doss lay motionless among corpses, waiting for the right moments to move. He crawled from body to body, checking pulses, whispering comfort, and pulling men into concealment. Every movement risked exposing him to enemy patrols only a few feet away. Several times, Japanese soldiers stepped so close he could hear their breathing. Doss steadied himself, praying they wouldn't hear the wounded men he was trying to save. Each time he found a living soldier, he dragged him to the cliff edge, tied a rope harness around the man's torso, and lowered him into the darkness, one life at a time. Hour after hour, Doss repeated the same impossible routine. Find, treat, drag, lower. His hands bled through his bandages, and his legs shook from exhaustion. Below the cliff, American soldiers were stunned. Every few minutes, another wounded man descended on a rope, whispering the same words, "Doss, Doss, saved me." Japanese patrols searched for the unknown rescuer, firing into the darkness, but Doss stayed ahead of them, slipping between craters and burned-out stumps like a ghost. By dawn, he had saved roughly 75 men more than many rifle squads combined. And still, he whispered the same prayer after each rescue. "Lord, help me get one more." When morning light cut through the smoke, the men of Company B looked around and realized something extraordinary. Most of the wounded they thought were lost were alive, and all had been lowered by one man. Officers stood speechless as stretcher after stretcher was carried to the aid stations. Many of the rescued men shouldn't have survived the night. Rumors spread fast. Doss had stayed on the ridge alone. He had worked under enemy patrols with no weapon, no support, and almost no strength left. For the first time, hardened veterans who once mocked him looked at Doss not as a misfit, but as the bravest man in the entire division. The next morning, officers ordered Company B to attack again, but no one moved. The soldiers stood frozen, glancing around, refusing to advance. When confronted, a sergeant explained the reason. "Sir, the men won't go without Doss. They wanted their medic, the man who had saved them, to be with them again." Doss emerged from the aid station, covered in bandages, limping, exhausted. Yet when he picked up his medic bag, the entire company straightened, as if courage flowed back into them. With Doss at the front, the men climbed the ridge once more, not following a weapon, but following the man who had proven he would never leave them behind. The Japanese launched a fierce counterattack. Machine guns erupted from hidden caves, mortars hammered the plateau, and smoke turned the battlefield gray. American lines fragmented under the assault, but Doss ran straight into the chaos, searching for the wounded. A soldier lay bleeding in the open, pinned by crossfire. Before anyone could stop him, Doss sprinted through bullets and explosions, treated the man under fire, and dragged him inch by inch through the mud to safety. Sniper shots cracked overhead while grenades rolled across the ground. Doss stayed in the kill zone, moving from one casualty to the next. His bandaged hands bled through the wraps, but he refused to stop. The most intense moment came when Staff Sergeant Howell, once one of Doss's harshest critics, was hit. Doss rushed into open fire, treated his shattered leg, lifted him in a fireman's carry, and ran through gunfire until both men reached cover. A grenade exploded near Doss, sending shrapnel deep into his leg. He was thrown to the ground, bleeding heavily, barely able to stand. Refusing a stretcher, Doss bandaged his own wounds with trembling hands. Others needed more, he insisted, shocking the medics trying to save him. Two soldiers tried to help him retreat, but a sniper's bullet struck his arm and snapped the bone. Even then, Doss insisted they leave him and help another severely wounded soldier instead. Dragging himself through dirt and blood, Doss crawled toward another man lying exposed. He hauled the wounded soldier to safety before collapsing, still thinking of others, never himself. Doss's body finally failed him. He was lifted onto a stretcher and carried toward the cliff edge. The battlefield fell strangely quiet as the medic who had saved so many was finally leaving it. He was lowered down the cliff on the same cargo net used to save dozens the night before. Below, wounded men pointed upward in awe. Their rescuer was finally the one being rescued. At the base, medics stabilized him. Doss then realized something devastating. His Bible, the gift from his wife, the book he carried everywhere, was gone somewhere on the ridge. When the men heard he lost his Bible, they did the unthinkable. Volunteers climbed back up the deadly ridge to search for it under fire. Hours later, they returned with the soot-covered Bible and placed it in Doss's hands. After weeks in hospitals, Doss returned to the United States, scarred, limping, and permanently injured, yet without a single regret. On the 12th of October 1945, President Harry Truman awarded him the Medal of Honor, telling him, "I consider this a greater honor than being president." Doss received the medal as a man who had never fired a shot. Doss became a national symbol, proof that courage didn't require violence. Veterans who once mocked him later called him the bravest man they had ever known. His story spread through America, inspiring documentaries, military ethics courses, and eventually a Hollywood film. Doss's legacy grew far beyond the battlefield. He lived quietly after the war, far from fame, but his name lived on in museums, military history halls, and at the base of Hacksaw Ridge itself. Visitors today see his Bible, his medical bag, and his Medal of Honor displayed in glass cases, symbols of a man who served with impossible courage. Most walk past, not realizing the depth of his sacrifice, but those who stop feel the weight of a soldier who saved 75 men with nothing but faith and resolve. Desmond Doss never sought glory, yet history claimed him as one of the greatest American heroes, a gentleman who carried no weapon but carried an entire battalion when they needed him most. Don't forget to hit subscribe to discover more untold stories of World War II.